Oh, you want to play psycho killer? Can I be the helpless victim?
Cross your eyes and scream, man. Scream for your life.
Welcome. I'm your Scream Queen, Jenica Olin. This is my 15th episode, and my theme for February is Till Death Do Us Part, with some love stories worth dying for. If you're new here, each episode will have an intro, brief synopsis of the movie, an analysis of the film, and then I get into the true crime of it all, or the true horrors of it all. I'm a huge true crime fan, and I like to make connections between the true horrors that inspire our darkest imaginations. The truth is, stuff on screen is way tamer than the true horrors that take place every day. Just watch the news for like 5 minutes, and you'll know what I'm saying. Spoiler alert, I've made it my job to spoil the shit out of this movie, so if you haven't seen Frankenhooker yet, please go watch it and then come back. Today, I will be covering the 1990 film Frankenhooker, directed by Frank Henenlotter, written by Robert Martin and Frank Henenlotter, starring James Lawrence, Joanne Ritchie, and Patty Mullen. Some trivia facts about this movie. So this movie was extremely expensive at over $2 million, which is crazy for a B horror film that barely made $200,000. So Henenlotter had some budgetary issues, to say the least. The producers told him they had used up all of the allotted funds for pyrotechnics during the exploding hookers scene, to which he replied, "How the fuck am I going to film the lab scene?" He ended up calling in a favor to do some unlicensed pyrotechnics. Lorenz recalls the guy finishing the setup and telling him, "Don't worry, it's maybe safe." Lots of confidence there. Bill Murray is a big fan of the movie and publicly endorsed it around the time of its release. Elizabeth has the last name of Shelley. This is a homage to Mary Shelley, of course, the author of the original Frankenstein. The scene where Jeffrey goes driving looking for ladies of the night to provide body parts was filmed in what is now Tribeca. It was a much different place then, though, and they got the shots from the open door of a moving van. The women featured were real women working the street. This was Henenlotter's first SAG film, meaning he was using actors who were members of the guild. But he ran into some trouble as the girls the guild was sending were not inclined to do nudity. So he went to Billy's Topless Bar looking for girls instead. And a short while later, he has several strippers signed on, each of them hired for specific degrees of nudity. SAG ended up making each of them members. So good for them. They eventually cut an R-rated film to market in addition to the unrated one. And one of the trims needed to secure the R was the limit to exploding prostitutes to 6 from the uncut version of a total of 7 exploding prostitutes. Before getting into acting in 1987, Patty Mullen was Penthouse Pet of the Month for August 1986. According to Frank Henenlotter, it was never meant to be a horror film. Apparently, he received complaints that the film is so bloodless, but he dismissed the complaints because he set out to make a comedy. While directing this film, Frank Henenlotter would take inspiration from Brian Yuzna's body horror films Reanimator, Bride of Reanimator, and Society. Let's set a scene with the synopsis of the movie.
Wow! Jeffrey's creation is alive.
Looking for some action?
Oh, yeah. She's sexy.
Want a date? You going out?
I'm on my way home, but thanks anyway.
And she's sutured to please.
Listen, I'm looking for a very tall, attractive woman. She's purple. She's got fresh scars on her.
She's in the bar.
Now, a motion picture like no other. A tender story of love and romance.
Want a date?
A gripping tale of lust and revenge. Frankenhooker.
Incredible.
Jeffrey Franken, a young man who lives in New Jersey, is a power plant worker and an amateur scientist who specializes in bioelectricity. He is about to marry his fiancée, Elizabeth. At the birthday party of Elizabeth's father, Jeffrey presents him with an automatic lawnmower as a gift. But when Elizabeth tries to demonstrate it, she is caught in its path and gruesomely killed.
Come on, this is your day. I don't want any credit.
He's always been creative.
What? And it's so easy. You just turn it on like this.
Don't stand in front of it.
And this controls the speed and the direction. So when you want it to go, you just press this.
You're on UHF. Don't stand in front of it!
Jeffrey is in his grief, begins plotting to use his knowledge of circuits to rebuild Elizabeth and bring her back to life. His grief drives him to have mock dinner dates with the few pieces of Elizabeth he could salvage, as well as performing self-trepanitation with a power drill to help himself calm down. He decides to make the perfect new body for Elizabeth by harvesting the body of New York City sex workers. After meeting several women and their abusive pimp Zorro, a muscle-bound, temperamental crack dealer, Jeffrey tricks Zorro into letting him rent every one of the women for a single night to find the one with the perfect body for Elizabeth. Inspired by the news report about crack cocaine causing deaths of many New York prostitutes, he develops a super crack, which he finds causes living beings to explode. Deciding he's doing nothing wrong, as crack will probably kill the prostitutes anyway, Jeffrey lures them all into a hotel room under the guise of a medical examination and marks the woman with the body parts he wants for Elizabeth. However, as he begins to have second thoughts, the prostitutes all find the bag of super crack and all smoke it despite Jeffrey's pleas, causing them all to explode into pieces.
Whoa! Holy shit! What's this? Holy shit, it's John! It's my job! Holy shit!
Zorro hears the commotion and rushes to the room, only to be knocked out by the flying head of one of his women. Jeffrey hurriedly puts the body parts into trash bags, promising to restore the woman once he brings Elizabeth back. After picking the perfect body parts and sewing them and Elizabeth's head together into a single body, Jeffrey uses the lightning from a nearby storm to shock Elizabeth's new body to life again. However, her body and face move awkwardly, and she can only repeat what the previous woman said before they died. The Frankenhooker escapes the basement and begins looking for clients in New York.
Want a date? You going out?
No thanks. I'm on my way home, but thanks anyway.
Well, look at the lady in purple. What truck hit you?
You looking for some action?
Hey, get your hands off me, babe.
Who end up exploding from electricity when they try getting intimate with her.
That was wonderful.
Jeffrey goes looking for Elizabeth and finds her at the bar. Zorro is there too, and upon hearing Elizabeth mention his name and recognizing her body parts, he angrily strikes her so hard that her head mostly detaches from her body.
Who the fuck are you? How come you don't bought me a Jersey boy? This ain't your tattoo. This ain't your arm. Where'd you get this arm? This is one of my bitches' arms. Who the fuck are you?
Jeffrey evades Zorro and takes Elizabeth home to repair her neck and revive her again. After bolting her head more securely to her new body, Jeffrey awakens Elizabeth, finding her memory restored. At first, Elizabeth is impressed that Jeffrey brought her back, but becomes furious when she realizes what her body is now made of and how Jeffrey obtained the parts. Jeffrey tries to explain himself, but he is attacked and decapitated by Zorro. who has followed him home. Zorro then attempts to drag Elizabeth away with him, justifying himself by claiming that most of her new body belongs to him. However, the spare prostitute parts have also been reanimated by the storm and merged into multiple grotesque limbed monsters, which overwhelm Zorro and drag him away into the storage cooler to his presumed death, along with his drugs. Elizabeth decides to revive Jeffrey via the same procedure he used on her, but since the procedure only works on female bodies, Elizabeth is forced to put Jeffrey's head on a body made from the prostitute body parts to bring him back. As Jeffrey awakens, Elizabeth happily says that they will be together forever as Jeffrey moans in horror at his new female body.
What did you do to me, Elizabeth?
Granted, what I did may have been a bit unorthodox, but hey, you look great, and you're alive, and you're back with me, and I love you. I love you, Jeffrey, and we're together again, all of us, together again.
It's time to talk horror, and today my guest is Mary Shelley. Hello, Mary Shelley. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am gazing upon a very beautiful woman. I'm about to talk about a wonderful horror movie called Frankenhooker with her, and she made me a beautiful cup of coffee, so I'm doing very great.
Well, you are so kind, Mary Shelley. So yes, we are speaking about Frankenhooker today. And I think this is a pretty important film that's very understated. It's actually like there are a lot of feminist themes in this movie. There's a lot of themes of drug addiction and the way the government and corporations treat people who are drug addicts and things like that. It's hidden under this mask of like silly creatures and like hilarious. I mean, this is a horror comedy, so there are a lot of really funny parts and they make it very light. And there are a lot of people who would think that this movie is misogynistic, and there is a lot of misogyny in it, but I see it as a highlight on those aspects more than actually being misogynist. What do you think?
Oh, wow. Okay, so to be honest, I watched this movie, I want to say over 10 years ago. For the first time, I fucking loved it. It was fantastic. It had me laugh. There was many parts that live rent-free in my brain. And long story short, I was like, okay, I'm coming on the podcast finally, and I'm going to rewatch it. And I tried to rewatch it last night under the influence, and I was showing it to a couple people that have never seen it. And let me just tell you, it is more funny than I could ever fucking remember. And I only got through half of it. I didn't realize in the beginning when he's like actually planning and mapping out to recreate his love after she dies.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like talking about this mole over and over that he wants removed on her body. And it was funnier than like I honestly remember. It had so many parts. I got up to the point that he's playing doctor in the hotel room with the hookers. They get the drugs and all start combusting.
Yes.
I have to finish it. I just was not mentally prepared to laugh that much, and it was very fucking therapeutic.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad.
As far as what you were saying earlier, I guess I never really thought of it in that sense, but I think it's there's a lot of aspects to it that I feel like are important that, um, just dealing with self-image and other things like that. And, uh, if I were to get chopped up by a lawnmower, and I was in charge of picking out my body, what would I want to look like? And I feel like a lot of people would choose possibly very similar bodies, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. So kind of on that note, in the beginning of the movie, so the girlfriend Elizabeth, or fiance Elizabeth, she's talking about wanting to lose weight.
Yes.
She's talking about her body image. And she's actually, so they have her like going and getting the gifts and everything. And you see, like, she's heavily padded. That's not her body. It's very obvious that she's padded. But even the way that they padded her, it just made her look like she had a big ass. And she still had like a really tight waist and all this stuff. So I thought it was funny. I was like, she looks like a fucking Kardashian.
I like a little extra butter on my bread, so I didn't necessarily think her body looked bad in the beginning. So that's what made me start to giggle at first, because I have a very similar romper that she was wearing. I was like, this fucking looks good on her. I was like,
No, it did. It was very cute, but she had a very cute shape, even with all this like padding, and it was definitely padding. And did you know that the actress, she was actually a Playboy model?
Yes, I fucking love Poppy. I met her at 2 horror conventions.
Huh?
She's fucking legit. She's super sweet. I actually dressed up as Frankenhooker like 10 years ago. I don't remember. It's very embarrassing, the pictures. I'll show you later.
I need to see those pictures later. I won't post them or anything,
No,
but I need to see
show
them.
you. And I was talking to Patty and I showed her, and she was like so fucking enthusiastic about it. And she spent like 10 minutes with me trying to recreate her iconic lips.
Oh God, I
and
don't know how she did that.
It's more difficult than you can
I don't know. Am I doing it?
Very similar. You have to adjust the upper lip a little bit and make it look like you're orgasming and in pain at the same time.
Yeah. That whole thing, when I see people try to recreate the lips, it's like no one can do it properly.
No, but I did it the one time in Atlanta with her, and she was like, she jumped up, and it was the cutest thing ever. She's fucking sweet. I met her twice, and she's definitely somebody that doesn't make you feel like a fan. It's more like she's just having a conversation with you, and I really appreciated that, like coming from somebody that has social anxiety, and then having a couple weird interactions with other women in horror. I really love Patty. Patty is a fucking doll.
Hopefully I can get her on at some point. That would be pretty amazing. So yeah, I really just love that. Even in the movie, okay, so we'll say prostitutes, but we know it's sex workers. If anyone, ladies of the night. So if anyone is offended by the language that we use, like saying hooker or prostitute or sex worker is not offensive, but these are words. This movie was made in the 1990s. That's the language that was in the movie. So it's going to creep up from time to time just because we're referencing the movie, but I will try to say, I mean, we are sex positive here. We do not care that these are ladies of the night or whatever you call it. There is no judgment here when it comes to that. Did you know that in the filming of this movie, the sex workers that are in the hotel when he's like measuring them and stuff, they were actual sex workers? Did you know that?
I'm going to tell you again, because watched it again last night. I appreciated, I guess, how authentic they looked, so that fucking makes sense 100%. Because I've seen prostitutes. We all live close by OBT. They don't fucking look like they're portrayed in a lot of newer movies. So, yes, I love that they hired them. It definitely added a little bit of, I guess, realism to the situation when he was in the room with them.
Yeah.
But they were beautiful. Especially when they were, dancing and
They were having a good time. Yeah, so apparently when he has this scene where he's like first like strolling the streets trying to find the perfect woman or her perfect parts, like all those shots as he's driving down, those are all like real shots of people working the streets. And then he was giving, so Henenlotter was, he was given actresses for the first time from like the SAG film, like, what am I trying to say?
Guild.
Yeah, the SAG guilds. But the girls that he was sent, he actually didn't want them because he was like, they didn't want to get nude. And he was like, he didn't necessarily want to see them nude. I don't know what these people look like that they sent him. But so he ended up getting actual sex workers off the street to be in his film and play the role of sex workers, which I think is super positive because he gave these women an opportunity to represent themselves. Like, I can't think of anything more powerful to give these women. And then not only that, he ended up making every one of them SAG members.
That's awesome.
So it's like a super positive thing for these women who are so disenfranchised and overlooked to actually be like, you know what, you have value here and I want to have you in my film. Like, I thought that was really awesome.
That, I did not know that, so that, I appreciate it a little bit more. I was reading about a couple things about the movie last night, and I guess they had an issue, like as far as rating was concerned.
Yeah.
So the director was basically saying that he got on a phone call with somebody, and the production company was basically like, "Congratulations, you're the first film to get rated S." And he was like, "What did that stand for, S?" And he's like, "Sex." And he was like, "No, for shit."
Yeah. They had to trim one of the explosions. So they originally had 7 exploding prostitutes and they had to cut it uncut version of there's a total of 7 exploding prostitutes, but in the R-rated version there's only 6. So that was the difference between X and R.
It's so crazy.
Like, you just need one less dead prostitute, please.
It makes me understand what they cut out as far as her explosion technique or whatever. I feel like the funniest one was definitely the one that was like on all fours for some reason. That one really tickled me last night.
That one, I think the one where she's like going to the door too, to like open the door and then she explodes and her head like hits Zorro in the head. You know, about Zorro too, like all these women are branded. And I think that was actually a really important tidbit that he put in there because, and it was like crude, and he makes the point to say like that looks crude the way that they are branded. And it's true, like women are treated like cattle, and they were branded in this really crude way. And we know that actually happens in especially with like sex trafficking and how they treat the women. So I thought that was a really interesting piece. And
There's a lot of I feel like deeper moments that address a lot of things. I did write about that little part, and then I'll go make it into one of my favorite characters in the movie is actually his mother.
yeah,
I found that she was like a soap opera actress or something.
That makes sense.
But the scene where he's like diving into like, she's like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "No, I'm like unraveling, blah blah." I basically don't know what's real or not, and he's going on, and then she just basically responds with, "Do you understand?"
Yeah. It's such a like of that generation, right? They can't deal with the trauma. They're like, all right, I let you get it out. You said what you had to say. Let me feed you. Maybe you're just a little hangry right now. Get a little food in you. You'll be just fine, darling.
We're just talking about this generation sucking.
Yes, they sucked as parents.
How much do you think this movie made in the box office?
Oh, nothing. Almost nothing. And it cost so fucking much money for the time, too.
$5 million for this fucking campy ass horror movie. And the box office was, I think, a little over 200,000.
Yeah, no, I saw that. It did not get the recognition that it deserves.
It still doesn't. Like, if you look at its ratings on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's like 60% or 6.2 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so underrated as far as like a campy 80s, 90s horror movie.
Yeah.
It's fucking funny as shit. I don't know.
It's funny, and there's so much more to it than I think people realize. And I think listening to this episode, maybe someone will realize, oh, they actually use like real sex workers, and they did all these things that actually helped empower these people that were, that are always being objectified, and kind of shining a light on it too. Oh my God, there's so much in this movie that I want to talk about. We'll get to, but so going back to the mother in that scene. Mm-hmm. So I love how Jeffrey Franken is being very open with his mom, letting her know he feels disconnected. He doesn't know what's reality anymore. And then, so it's like the mad scientist of it all, like the mad science of it all. And he has like probably the most horror of scene of the movie is when he's having dinner with his deceased fiancée, and he's got her body parts on the other side of the table, and he's like serving her wine, and it's that scene was
the wine
so
like spilling all over the table.
Yeah, coming out of her neck, like
the pizza slice on the beautiful whatever that little lid thing is or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That scene was fucking fantastic. The guy who did the special effects, I can't remember his name, like Gabriel or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he worked with the director also on Brain Damage, mm-hmm. and I think Basket Case.
Yeah, and they were filming Brain Damage. I think it was Brain Damage at the same time. They were filming a different film at the exact same time, and they both got released back to back.
Basket Case too, I think.
Yeah, that's the one that it was. They took inspiration from Brian Yuzna's body horror and Reanimator and Bride of Reanimator and Society. So their creatures, so their creatures are all based on Brian Yuzna's body horror. And I know you said you didn't get to the very, very end, but you need to get to that scene again in the very end when all the body parts come out of the cooler, and it's very Yuzna like body horror. It's so good. every creature that comes out, and they take Zorro and they put him back in the cooler with them, and he's presumed dead, and then they go and they like grab the crack and they go in.
The super crack.
The super crack. Let's talk about super crack for a second, because it's really interesting. My true crime connection is actually going to be the crack epidemic and how it was treated at the time, and the laws that were passed based on racist views of people who, because it primarily affected the Black community. But his whole speech before, as he's about to make this super crack, is him saying, it's not like I put a gun to their head. He's like, if they made a choice, they'll take it. It's not like I killed them. It's not like I made them do it. He's going to put this drug on the streets that he knows has the potential to kill them. But he's not taking responsibility for the fact that he would be causing their death, because he's not making them do it. They're the degenerates. They're the ones that want it. They're coming to get it no matter what. They're going to kill themselves no matter what. So why does it matter that I'm the one providing it? That was the line of thinking, which is big pharma, which is our government, which is, all these corporations. And that's like feeding on the whole corporate greed. And, he's got the bag of money, and he's disgusted with them when they want the money. He's like, oh, that's what this is all about. But then, and that also speaks on to, these predatory businesses that have so much money, and they don't give a shit what happens to the people around them that they're taking advantage of, that these people, they're going to come and get what they can because they don't have anything. But what does that matter? Like the few $100s that you're getting from the company that's multi-billion-dollar company, why the fuck do they care that you're getting the few $100s? They don't. And that's exactly, like, he is basically encompassing big pharma and the government, I think, in this movie.
With the super crack.
Yeah, with the super crack.
Crack is whack, baby.
Yes.
Yeah, there's many things wrong, a lot of things going on, but coming from someone that had health issues and getting put on like a bunch of different medications and being codependent on stuff, it's all very fucked up on the street or something that's prescribed to you.
Exactly. I find it really interesting when he's like, oh, you want the money? He has all the girls in the room, and he's like, I don't know if I can go through with this. He has like a moment of actual gaining a conscience for a second, like a nanosecond, and then they want their money. So he gets very irritated with them, and he's like, well, here's the money, and he like throws the bag at them, and they take all the money out, and they're all excited because bitches got to get paid, like what the fuck, know. And then they find this super crack in the bag, and they're all excited, and he's like, no, that's not good, you shouldn't take that. And so that was his, like, him just saying that's not good, you shouldn't do it, like that absolved him in his head, that absolved him from their deaths.
Can we just talk about how big of a bag the super crack was? That was supposed to be for one person?
For a second, I thought maybe he was making a deal with Zorro where he would be his supplier and he would make the crack for him because he's like this science smart guy, and Zorro's like, I need more crack, so you should be my laboratory man. But I don't think that's what was actually happening. But and then they all explode, and it's very theatrical, very electrifying, I would say.
But we're still missing one explosion. Now that when you said that earlier, it kind of makes me feel like I'm missing something.
I'm sure we can find the missing piece somewhere
Please find
on the
it.
internet. I will find that missing explosion and I will make it into a reel. I'll say this is now it's rated X. We won't give it the S rating because we know that it's not shit.
It's not. It deserves so much more.
So when it comes to Zorro and his like possession of these women, like he doesn't really give a shit what happens to them. When she comes back and he notices all the body parts, he punches her and makes her head fall off. It just shows like he's like, you're mine. This belongs to me. He's just possessive over these women, but that's what a pimp is, right? But like anyone who works in the industry, they're being sex traffickers. I'm not saying every pimp is a sex trafficker. Sometimes you have a love interest that's your pimp that's actually looking out for you. I've heard of those stories, but that's like a rare love story with a pimp and a sex worker. A pimp and a prostitute, I'll say, because it goes, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Zorro is definitely the kind that is just sex trafficking. And so when the women get revenge, so that's another theme in this movie is like women's revenge. And so when they take him into the cooler with all the like deformed body parts, you have to get to it. But it's so awesome because they finally get their revenge on him because he's a piece of shit. Like everyone's scared of him. They go into that bathroom, and that bathroom scene where Jeffrey is talking to Zorro is so insane.
The first time he interacts with him.
Yeah,
when I was watching it last night and showing the people that haven't seen it, they're like, "What the fuck is going on in there?" And there's like a stall with like a woman and two guys.
They keep trying to close the door. Yeah, he plays a good villain. I'll say that. Oh, so one thing that I found, which was a really amazing piece of dialogue, was when the TV show came on. And so there's a scene where they're talking about the crack epidemic. And it's like a segment on the TV, and that's what gives him the idea to even make the super crack. But there's like a Black woman on the screen, and she's saying like it's not their fault, like they need help. And the host of the show is like, oh, what are we going to do next if we help them? What are we going to pay for their hotels for them to take their sex workers and all this stuff? And it's just like the whole like escalating things into a ridiculous dialogue that makes no fucking sense. And it's the same shit. It's the same kind of shit that happens today when it comes to politics and the way that they scare people like, oh, if we give them this, well, are we going to have to give them X, Y, and Z? And just like keep continually escalating it to an absurd place. I really thought that was a great dialogue that they had in there, and just it put a microscope to what the larger problem was in society at that time and still is. Okay, so I kind of want to talk on the trans aspects of this movie. There is definitely, you know what I'm talking about.
The ending?
Yes.
The ending is one of my favorite endings of all time.
I love it.
It's so great because she still loves him, and he's distraught, and he's like, obviously not happy about, his body.
Yeah.
But she still loves him, and I think it couldn't have had a better ending, like, honestly.
Yeah.
And going back to the beginning, like, he obviously loves Elizabeth, and he's, like, wanting her back, but he's, like, investing so much time in making her, perfect, and how he wants her to look. And going back to the mole, like, he doesn't want the mole there, and then he is, examining, playing doctor with all the prostitutes to find the best body, and at the end of the day, the remaining body parts are on him, and I think it's fucking great.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect commentary on like it doesn't matter what sex you are. It's like there's a whole non-binary theme in there. It's like I love you no matter who you are, and I just wanted you to be alive. And so the
Like
reagent, yeah, for her,
her
that's
brain is it's a woman's brain versus a man's brain.
yeah, exactly. And she's like, well, it only works with estrogen. So I had to give you women parts. And so I made you. And she's like, I love you just as you are. And he's distraught over it, but too fucking bad. You're like, you did it. It's almost like payback too.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I love because she wasn't happy with the body she was given. When she finds out that, I love how she uses the same words with him. She's like, you were gone. I had to bring you back. You were gone. And that's like what he was telling her when she came back and was actually herself. And then when she realized, she's like looking at the body parts and she's like, what is this? Who is this from? This isn't my body. She wasn't happy that her body was discarded. So it was definitely fucking payback. And it was like who gives a shit about the body? Like, this isn't about, it's about, I love you. And no matter who you are, no matter what your body looks like. So there's this whole very non-binary undertones to it, and I think it's quite beautiful. So
no, I am very excited to actually finish it, but I remember the ending very vividly because I was like, this is great.
mm-hmm.
I thought about that on my drive over here because I was like, man, I was like, I really wish I finished the movie. And then I was trying to remember the ending. And then I was like, the ending was so good. I mean, it was definitely payback. It was, I feel like a very strong point going back to, her being okay or being okay with him, with the different body parts and stuff like that, and him having, a meltdown about it. And
Mm-hmm.
Versus him in the beginning, spending all of his time and going crazy trying to figure out like how to bring her back to life, but also, how to create the perfect woman,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, physically.
Yeah. It's like they're very, it's contrasting ways of looking at a person that you love. His way is very objectifying, and her way is like, I just wanted to bring you back. It didn't matter what body parts they were. She just slapped it all together, and he had a great rack at the end of it.
Yeah.
It was like triple D or something.
Speaking of breasts, I loved that they made Elizabeth's nipples purple.
Yes.
I was like, this is such a great element that was unnecessary, but also very welcomed in my eyes.
I read something that they kept trying to make her pubic hair purple as well. But I guess the dye wouldn't stay, and they never did like a full frontal. They decided not to do the full frontal because it would have like been distasteful is what they said or something. I think it went even more into like the whole X rating, right? So that they just decided to cut that, but they were dyeing women's pubic hair purple, trying to make it work.
I mean, coming from a woman that tried to dye her own pubic hair, it's very difficult. And my armpit hair too.
Oh wow. I've never even thought of that. That hair is very coarse and weird, and it's not like the hair on your head. Also, just like, I mean, I appreciate that over being fully shaven. I would much rather see a purple bush than a a grown-ass woman that is smooth like a baby down there. Like, we're fucking women. We're not Barbie dolls. We're not like, I'm a woman, okay?
You are a woman. You're a beautiful woman. And I agree.
Well, you are also a beautiful woman. You are, with your fiery hair. I won't describe you too much on here. I think we pretty much covered it all. We went through the emotional roller coaster of, you know, this being a feminist film, talking about drug addiction, talking about the exploitation of women, body image. Thank you for being here and talking to me about this movie, which is really fucking campy and ridiculous on the surface, but then if you just look a little bit deeper, pay attention to the shit that's happening in the movie, and there's so much more to it than I think anyone could grasp just from one watch. It definitely deserves a watch. If you have not seen this movie, go watch it.
Holy shit, girls! It's Jones! Super Jones! A whole shitload of Jones!
Now it's time for the true horrors of it all. Frank Henenlotter felt that the film had important messages inside of the absurdity with the use of super crack and estrogen-based reanimation fluid. In an interview about his films, Hen said, he tried to fix Elizabeth in his way, and that's why he paid the price. New York was in the grips of the crack explosion at the time. When I was filming Brain Damage, we were working on a street that was hooker central, literally. And in the morning, I'd walk to where we were shooting, and there were 2 items that would cover the sidewalk: used condoms and crack vials. And it was that awareness of it that seeped into the film. Why don't we make super crack? Everyone was doing crack. So, with that, the true horror connection is the crack epidemic that started in the 1980s and went into the 90s. I got my information from an article by The Guardian titled "When Crack Was King, Looking Back at an Epidemic That Destroyed Lives." This article heavily references the book When Crack is King by Donovan Ramsey. So politicians and media spread myths about a doomed generation of crack babies. I remember hearing that term a lot. Police cracked down on strict anti-gun law, or not anti-gun, that'd be great, anti-drug laws, leading to mass incarcerations primarily from low-income communities of color. The Black community got hit the worst when it came to the crack epidemic. In the 1980s, America had an excess of cocaine, and the drug was seen as like being cool and chic and glamorous. You see it in movies all over the place. People are like putting shit up their nose left and right. This was the drug of the rich. If you were putting shit up your nose, you had status, you were glamorous, and no one looked down on people shoving snow in their nose. So around this time, people started looking for other ways to consume it. A group of chemistry students at UC Berkeley in California came up with a recipe for freebasing cocaine using water and baking soda. The resulting substance was a highly potent form of cocaine that is smoked rather than snorted, leading to an inexpensive, immediate, and intense high. It was a short-lived high that left the user craving more. This was the birth of our cracked out America. Crack quickly found its way into Black communities in the aftermath of the civil rights movement. People were without jobs, people were in poor housing, and they didn't see a better life ahead. Anytime you have circumstances like that, people want to check out. And they chose this new drug that was still glamorous, but it was cheap and super accessible, with no idea of this devastation it would cause. Richard Nixon had run a Law and Order, I know we've heard that recently, campaign for president in 1968 and declared war on drugs 3 years later. Ronald Reagan latched onto the war on drugs that the Nixon administration was never able to fully implement. He signed into law the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, mandating a 5-year minimum prison sentence for the possession of 5 grams of crack, a sharp disparity with powder cocaine, more associated with celebrities and middle class. Reagan and his wife Nancy were behind public information initiatives that included specific sitcom episodes aiming to frighten children away from drugs, but also pushing misinformation about addiction, and they demonized entire communities. The devastation of the crack epidemic was not just the drug use itself, but also the government's response to the drug use. On the policy level, the U.S. government turned a blind eye despite knowing the fact that large quantities of cocaine were being shipped into the U.S. Cocoa leaves don't grow in the ghetto. Cocoa leaves are grown in the Andes, where America had its grubby little hands in the honeypot. The U.S. government wanted to fund the overthrow of governments like the government of Nicaragua, and Congress would not approve that kind of meddling in a foreign government. So, very simply, we turned the other way while Nicaraguan rebels distributed cocaine into the United States, and as a result, we saw the crack epidemic really take off. The government, instead of intercepting and interceding in that drug trafficking, decided to criminalize drug possession. Why not make the victims also the villains? Just keep passing the buck. This link is not a conspiracy theory, and it has been well documented. When it comes to drug policy, there was a 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine that was completely arbitrary. That was addressed during the Obama administration, but it's still 18-to-1. Despite all we know about the consequences of it and about crack being the same substance, there isn't yet enough political will to completely eliminate the disparity because there's just so much fear. Part of why we have mass incarcerations in the U.S. is the policy of mandatory minimum sentences. It takes the discretion away from judges to give time to offenders based on a number of different factors. Instead, it says if you do a crime, then you have to get a certain sentence, and that keeps people locked up. Those are crack era policies. So the true horrors here are the people seen as what is known as the less dead in the true crime community. So like the Black community, sex workers, and people of color, people living in severe poverty, and are not the villains, but the victims to America and corporate greed. You can think of Jeffrey Franken as Big Pharma. He doesn't take responsibility for the death of the sex workers because he didn't make them take it. He warned them that they shouldn't, but they did anyway. So really, in the movie, there's the whole dialogue about how, like, I didn't put my gun to their head. I didn't make them do it. I didn't make them kill themselves. No, he made something intentionally addictive, intentionally deadly, and then blames it on the person who is addicted and who dies from it. Let's end on a high note. If you would like to collaborate on something, I would love the opportunity to connect with more people in the horror scene. I'm currently scheduling guests to be on episodes for March and April. I've decided to do a monthly competition where listeners leave reviews on whatever podcast platform they listen from and email me proof in the way of screenshots to screamqueenpodcaster@gmail.com. Each week, I'll be calling out listeners for showing their support, and monthly, I will be printing out all the reviews, sticking them to my wall, and then throwing darts at them. Don't worry, I'll have it all on video. So some reviews that I want to shout out this week are on Spotify. Jesse Goodman said, compelling discussion of an old classic and a spot-on comparison of Melania Trump as a de facto bride of Frankenstein. Fun listen and great podcast. Thank you. I'm glad that you appreciated that comparison. I still stick by what I said. I believe Melania Trump is the modern bride of Frankenstein. On Instagram, Jesse Taylor Art Sarasota, I really had to pull that username apart, commented on a short video I made about Carl von Kossel that's connected to my previous episode on Bride of Reanimator. He said, been there a lot through the years, and that totally sounds like a Key West kind of thing, even in modern times. On Blue Sky, I have a video on 10 horror movies that I saw when I was under 10 and how they influenced my love of horror. And a lot of people jumped on that thread, and there were a lot of really good conversations about horror movies that people watched when they were young and what really got them into horror to even begin with. So I love these conversations. I love finding out what got people into horror. And if you haven't noticed, I just talk to my friends about horror. And if you want to be my friend and talk about horror with me, then just hit me up. I'm pretty easy to talk to, I think. And I like hearing different perspectives. Please don't be creepy. If you're being creepy, I'm not going to let you be on an episode. I really want to talk to women in the horror scene more than anything else. So if you're a woman in the horror scene and you want to be heard and you want to appear on an episode, just reach out to me. For everyone that's downloading, liking, subscribing, and commenting on the podcast through whatever platform you choose, thank you for your support. Sincerely. Keep those comments, likes, and reviews coming. It really helps the Scream Queen out. And I want to engage with my listeners because it's fun and not isolating. I'm learning a lot about the horror scene, especially when it comes to women in horror. We are underrepresented, and I hear the phrase, I don't know any women who like horror. What I see is that we are much smaller in numbers when it comes to the horror community at large, and the men have the power in most cases. But we're here. There are lots of women in the horror scene, and I want to give them a voice when it comes to horror and how it is perceived. After all, horror is inherently feminist to its core. I'll take on any mama's boy in a mask that says otherwise. This is a weekly podcast with new episodes every Thursday. All the research, writing, and audio is done by yours truly. This is a one-woman show, and I'm doing my very best. I have a monthly horror event at Conduit in Orlando, Florida. You can find me on Instagram at Scream Queen Podcaster, Blue Sky at Scream Queen Podcast, TikTok at Scream Queen Podcast, and there is a link tree that will take you to all the different places. It's like a portal that will take you to all the different dimensions in which you can consume my media. I can be found on pretty much any platform. So if you found me here, go find me there. Until next time, goodbye.